There's a phrase I like that says, relax, nothing's under control.
Today on That One Time, I'm joined by Dr. Robert Glover. Dr. Glover is a world-renowned relationship therapist and best-selling author of No More Mr. Nice Guy.
Robert, I've read every self-help book out there. Your book really was the one that made sense as to why things weren't working well for me.
What is a nice guy?
So the nice guy believes if I just get everybody's approval and avoid their disapproval, then I will be liked and loved and get my needs met. Nice guys are not capable of intimacy. How can anybody have an intimate experience with me if I'm not having an intimate experience with myself?
There's lots of little things that individually have small impacts, but together they are very, very powerful.
Life is difficult. This is an important truth because once we accept that life is difficult, life ceases to be difficult.
It's very powerful to hear something like that. It gives me shivers a little bit. In this episode, you'll learn the pitfalls of being a nice guy and what impact that has on the world. I found this conversation extremely interesting and thought-provoking. So with that in mind, I think you'll really enjoy this conversation with Dr. Robert Glover. And if you enjoy this episode, please give us a rating and a follow. We're on a journey to 1,000 subscribers and every bit helps. Dr. Robert Glover, welcome to the podcast.
Adam, welcome back. We just finished the lightning round. Now we're ready for the heavy lifting.
Yeah, we're ready for the real stuff.
And by the way, I love your fingernails.
Thank you.
I just keep catching a little flash of them.
Yeah, they need a bit of work, but they're a lot of fun. It's we can dig into that and some interesting kind of.
I get my toenails painted, so we can share stories about painting our nails.
Yeah, I love it. Sounds good. It's going to be a good conversation. But before we get started, I just really want to just say it's an absolute honor to have you on today. I read your book a while ago and I took a number of different specific and actionable takes from it. And that's always a big win. I think the work that you're doing in this space is really, really, really important, especially in the modern world with men that are feeling lost. They're losing the family dynamic. They're losing, the ability to communicate. It's a bit of a mess. And I think the work that you and others like you do is really important to kind of keep us moving forward as a species. So
thank you. I actually agree with you. I think the work I'm doing is vitally important, and that's why I'm doing it. And hopefully we'll keep doing it for a while.
Yeah, hopefully we won't need to do it, and you'll be able to ride off into the sunset.
There'll always be work to done. Always be work to be done. That's okay.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that you see the importance as well, and I'm sure that's very, very motivating to work hard that I see you doing, because you're all over the place.
That's why I'm counting macros. I want to be at this for at least another 20, 25 years, and so if I keep my body and brain as sharp as I can, I'll let Mother Nature and DNA and just fate take care of the rest. But I'll do what I can because I like what I'm doing and I do think it's important. I think it's essentially important. So that's why I say yes to doing things like this, talking to really cool people like you.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. So on that note, I'd love to get a feel for an elevator pitch of who you are, what you do, and how you're contributing to the world.
Oh man, it's not an elevator pitch. That's a book.
It's a 100 flight elevator that's just broken at level 40.
Yeah, if I give that elevator pitch, somebody's going to be putting ice pick in their ear before we get to their floor. Okay, who I am. I've written, when people usually refer to my book, they're usually referring to No More Mr. Nice Guy, which I wrote about 25 years ago. It's been out about 20 something years now. Mm-hmm. It's made a pretty big impact on men and women around the world. The royalty checks keep getting bigger every year. So
isn't that weird, right?
More and more. Most books don't live more than about 45 days. So it's lived over 20 years, which is pretty cool because a lot of publishers told me, Robert, we like your book, but our marketing department says men won't buy a self-help book. Thank goodness to podcast and Amazon, men do buy self-help books. And that's good. That's good news. So, I've written 3 other books, a couple of dating books. I'm a marriage and family therapist by training. When people ask me what I do, the answer is too complicated. So I usually just say I sell shit on the internet. Cause I do. I sell my workshops and books and classes and my, men's membership program, Integration Nation. So I've been working with people and working on me for, going on probably 40 years. Been working almost exclusively with men for about probably 20 plus years. Mm-hmm. I just really, really like working with men. I like how, men, you can hit them upside the head with a big stick and they go, thank you. Thank you for getting my attention. I was going the wrong direction. I was mistaken. I love getting emails from men that say, thank you for your books. They changed my life. Mm-hmm. I live in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. I moved here about 12 years ago and get in and out of here quite a bit, travel around the world, talking to people. And, I like getting up every morning knowing that I make a difference. Even if I don't know in every moment what difference I'm making, as soon as I think, well, maybe it doesn't really matter, I get a great email or a text that says, Robert, thank you. You saved my life. And I go, okay, I'll keep doing what I'm doing.
It's very powerful to hear something like that. It gives me shivers a little bit.
It still gives me shivers. I hope it always does. If it quits giving me shivers, I made a commitment 25 years ago. Like when I got my first ever email that, it's from somebody in Australia that said, Robert, thank you for your book. And that was probably back when it was just out as an ebook before it got published in print. And I thought, how cool is that? Somebody in Australia wrote me. Then I started getting more emails. And, it's kind of like getting a compliment. It's kind of easy just to brush it off. Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I like that tie as well. Or, oh, okay, great, thanks. I made a commitment. I would read every single email, text, message. Anytime someone took the time to reach out and tell me I'd made a difference in their life, I made a commitment to read it and be still with it and let it sink in, because the work I've done has made a difference. It's changed lives, and those people took the time to want to write me or leave me a message letting me know that. So I get lots of messages, lots of emails that say thank you, and I read them all, and I read them all soberly. I breathe them in and just let it sink into my nervous system, because it's easy to we rush through so many things, but that's one thing I don't want to rush through.
Well, that's the best part of it. I feel like making the impact. You want to savor that moment.
Yeah. Why the hell make an impact if you're not going to even pay any attention to the impact? Yeah. No worries. Yeah. You're wasting my time telling me how great I am. Don't do that.
No, of course not. So on that note, it sounds like a very interesting life that you've led, and the pathways that got you to the point where you became a psychologist, and then you wrote your books, and you've been speaking and doing all of that sort of stuff. That stems from, as you would know, as a psychologist, your early years. So what are those years, and what are the contexts around those years that kind of allow us to understand you as a human that got you to this point?
Oh, good question. Digging into the psyche of the psyche. Of course, I've spent a lot of time, looking at, why am I me? Why do I feel what I feel, do what I do, experience what I experience, and probably always will. And just kind of, just in terms of just the chronology, I was the second of four kids. My parents married pretty young. My mother I used to think she had three kids in diapers, with me being the second of the three, but she said, oh no, your sister was potty trained really young. I go, oh, okay, that's actually not a good sign, but and so my parents were young. I don't think either one of them grew up with much love or affection. I think both of my grandfathers were critical. I think both of my grandmothers were controlling and not particularly loving.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Seattle, and both of my parents, came from different areas, but met in Seattle and then married and lived there. So neither of my parents came from families that showed a lot of love. I asked my mother one time, she had a twin sister. She has a twin sister, and I asked her a couple of years ago. Her twin sister was visiting, and I asked them both. I said, what do you remember about your mother? And they both looked and go, nothing. Don't really remember much about her. I'm going, that seems significant. They said she was always just working or not available. And I grew up around my grandmother, and I don't have any grandmother stories. I don't remember her she was there, but I don't remember much about her either. She wasn't particularly loving or affectionate anyway. So as a family, I grew up. And my father, I have a lot of good memories about him. He died about 12 years ago. and that he came to all my sporting events and was always playing catch with me and pitching to me and was available, took us camping and fishing. And he was also moody and critical and angry. And young age, decided I don't want to be like him in that way. Mm-hmm. And my mother was very codependent, taught me to be codependent, taught me to be different from my father. She even said, I'm raising my boys to be different from their father. She told me that when I was a kid. She later actually apologized for both saying that and doing that. Well, okay, I'll give her credit for that. I grew up in a very, my job was to take care of my mother, be the good man that my dad wasn't in her eyes, and grew up in a very fundamental Christian church. And so I grew up with, kind of the hellfire and brimstone that if you look at a woman's breast and if they look good to you, you're going to burn in hell for all eternity. So that's kind of, I have no sexual shame whatsoever. And so grew up with that. I got a very good education, which I'm grateful for, public school education, and got some basic free rides to college and grad school. So I'm very grateful to get a very good education. I grew up during the 60s and 70s. I kind of missed the summer of love and all the, the free sex and free acid. That was a little before my time. But I did grow up during the angry feminism of the 60s and 70s, where every man's a rapist, an erection's a sign of aggression, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle.
So nothing's changed.
Yeah, it's just angry feminism, 3.0 probably. Yeah. Hashtag me too, toxic masculinity. It's still, just a repeat of the same thing I grew up with. And that I took seriously and internalized and did not want to be that bad man that I heard about. I have 2 degrees in religion. I was a minister for 8 years. Mm-hmm. I have a PhD in marriage and family therapy. I've been working with people for 40 years, and I'm no longer religious. Mm-hmm. I think I'm a spiritual seeker, mainly because I'm curious. Like I said, we're both the creator and the created. I think that's actually a phenomenally deep concept that humans have been grappling with, since we've been grappling with the ability to think beyond ourselves. So I'm a spiritual seeker. I'm curious. I'm also skeptical. I'm inclined towards the scientific method, but I believe there may be things the scientific method can't quite show us yet. Been married 3 times. Mm-hmm. I used to say after my second divorce, I learned how to date well. And so guys started saying, teach us. So I'm not a dating guru, but I ended up teaching programs and writing 2 books on dating. And there was a period of time in my life, I would say I'm a marriage and family therapist that's been divorced twice and a dating guru that doesn't have a girlfriend. And people still line up to pay me money. And you got to have a sense of humor about yourself. I've bumbled my way through every relationship I've ever had, which I think is actually human nature, because I don't think we're really built to try to do relationships the way we try to do them. I'm 68 years old, having a good time, working my ass off still. And
but you love it, right?
I love working my ass off, but I love, a couple of weeks ago, I spent a couple of weeks out camping up in the Cascade Mountains of Washington State, just relaxing and having a good time. So I like doing both. I like working, and I do like relaxing and spending time with people I love.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. It's good to
anybody
understand.
Poking the ice pick in their ear yet saying enough.
No, not at all. I don't think so. I think it's really important to understand these contexts because it frames the way you think about the world and how it,
doubt,
how your thought process impact your decision making. So it's very, very important. So on that note, and digging into a little bit of the Nice Guys Finish Last work, which you're best known for, and these concepts around the nice guys, I'd like to dig into this a little bit, and then I'd like to come back to some of the key points that you mentioned earlier and try and piece it all together. So for the audience that doesn't know or hasn't read your book, what is a nice guy?
Okay. Yeah, we'll just start with the basics here.
Start with the basics.
Yeah, here's the true elevator pitch. All right. A nice guy or a nice girl, right, is somebody who inaccurately internalized, usually at a very young age, few weeks, few months, few years old, internalize an emotional belief, I'm not okay just as I am. Mm-hmm. I'm the cause of all the painful experiences I have. Mm-hmm. This isn't a rational belief. It's an emotional belief. And so out of that emotional belief that we tend to call toxic shame, that I'm unlovable, I'm bad, I'm hurtful, I'm not good enough, comes two lifelong, technically they're called neuroses. We could call them survival mechanisms, defense mechanisms. But it's two mechanisms. One is trying to become what I think other people want me to be, so I'll be liked and loved and get my needs met. And number two, trying to hide anything about me that might get a negative reaction from somebody. So that'd be like, if I'm talking to you, if I was in that paradigm, I would be highly super vigilant on your face, your eyes, your facial expression, your body language, your head nods, and go, okay, he's nodding his head. That was good. I'll keep saying those kinds of things. Okay, he kind of laughed. That was good. But if he kind of gets a perplexed look or an angry, oh no, that must have been the wrong thing to say. I'll back off. I won't go there again. That would be the internal state of a nice guy 24/7 in every aspect of the world. So basically, nice guys are trying to do those two things. And again, technically they're called neuroses. We all have neuroses. Neuroses are the things we learn to do to try to adapt at a very early age. They got kind of impacted, concreted into our emotional system, our nervous system, our view of self in the world, carried them into adolescence, tried on a lot of different shit. Those got even, further riveted in it. And then we come into adulthood thinking this is the way the world works. But the truth is everybody's living in a neurotic state. Now, neurotic doesn't mean we're bad. Neurosis just means we learned what seemed like adaptive behaviors at a young age, but actually in adulthood, they tend to be fairly maladaptive, sometimes mildly maladaptive to severely maladaptive. And nice guy syndrome falls in that category. It made sense maybe at a very early age at an emotional level to try to not upset anybody and try to keep everybody happy, keep the peace, don't rock the boat, don't, avoid those scowls, those looks, the screams, the anger, the abandonment, and try to get the smiles and the attention. I mean, that made sense to a young, dependent, needy child, but doing that as an adult is highly maladaptive in terms of actually getting what you want in love and life. So that's a nice guy. So the nice guy believes if I just get everybody's approval and avoid their disapproval, then I will be liked and loved and get my needs met. Mm-hmm. Now, there's lots of different variations on that theme, but that's the core roadmap or paradigm of the nice guy.
Okay. And how does a nice guy or a nice girl, how does that behavior set be problematic for their lives and the world as a whole and the people in their lives?
All right. I wrote a book about that. That's a good question. I began No More Mr. Nice Guy basically talking about, what's wrong with being a nice guy? Because you would think, and I did for many years, being a nice guy is a good thing. Like me being different from my father, that's a good thing. Being different than all the jerks that I heard women complain about, well, that'd be a good thing. Not being aggressive, not being angry, being pleasing, being helpful, being generous. I thought all those would be, really good things. The core problem is that the nice guy or nice girl is inauthentic. They're not real. They're not who they really are. They're constantly basically wearing a mask, playing a role, being a chameleon, and they don't know it. See, that's the problem. You don't know it. And if you're not authentic, if you don't really express your true opinion, your wants, your feelings, your thoughts, if you don't say yes to what you want to say yes to. I read a quote not long ago that really profound to me. It said, the majority of problems people experience, let's see if I can get it right, usually is a result of saying no to the things they wanted to say yes to and saying yes to the things they wanted to say no to. I thought, that just sums up the nice guy syndrome right there. Yeah. And so that means we're not particularly honest. We're not authentic. We're not transparent. We're not trustworthy. What got me in my own personal recovery was my second wife. I had acted out and behaved in some bad ways, and she found out and, of course, was upset and confronted me and said, everybody thinks you're such a nice guy, but you're not. You can hurt me. I can't trust you. You embarrass me. You don't follow through. You need to go get help. And she was right. I mean, I didn't think she was at the time. You're the one who's always unhappy all the time. I'm the one always trying to do good things. And luckily I took her ultimatum and I went and got help. And luckily I landed in some pretty good places that helped me really start understanding that this nice guy paradigm did not make me a nice guy. That for all my generosity, all my covert contracts, I call them in No More Mr. Nice Guy, my giving to get, and that is after I gave to you all this, you didn't give back, then I'm resentful, I'm passive aggressive, I have victim pukes, I pout, I withdraw, I'm hurtful, I'm mean, I'm sarcastic, whatever, controlling. All those things are not particularly nice behaviors. But even beyond that, I just wasn't authentic. I wasn't real. I wasn't my real self. So how can anybody relate to me? How can anybody have an intimate experience with me if I'm not having an intimate experience with myself? I've never actually said it exactly that way. I'm going to have to remember that one. That's actually pretty good. I love how stuff just comes out. So yeah, how can I have an intimate relationship with anybody else if I'm not having an intimate relationship with myself? And I define intimacy as knowing self and being known by another. So nice guys are not capable of intimacy. Now, we may try to get close. We may try to have connection. We may try to please people so they'll like us and want to be around us, but that doesn't build true intimacy. So there's kind of a nutshell. There's a lot of other stuff of how nice guy stuff comes up that makes life difficult for the nice guy and for others as well. But we can continue to dive into some of those other pieces.
You mentioned the covert contracts. I think that's a really interesting point around all of this, because really the fabric of society comes around, social contracts with one another. So what is an example of a covert contract, and what should the healthy version of that be? Maybe we can do a little exercise around the two polarities.
Yeah, good question. Okay. Covert contracts is one of my favorite parts of the book. And a lot of people tell me the same. I'm going to sum them up even clearer than I do in the book. And that nice guys tend to operate from three basic covert contracts. Number one is that if I'm a good guy, I'll be liked and loved. And so I'll be a good guy to you, and you'll like me, but the thing is, nobody likes and loves everybody. And where this really can become toxic is where the nice guy uses what I call nice guy seduction, where they interact with a woman and they listen to her talk about her problems, her jerk ex, they'll fix things for her. They'll pay her rent. They'll pick her up and drive her somewhere, all the while, and they'll hide their sexual agenda from the woman, all the while thinking, I do all these nice things for me, you'll like me and want to be my girlfriend. To put it bluntly, I'll hide my sexual agenda from you so that you'll want to get naked with me. It doesn't make sense, but covert contracts rarely make a lot of sense. So that's where often their passive aggressiveness and victim pukes and not so nice behavior can come in, is I'm a good guy, but yet you still don't want to be my girlfriend, or you don't like me or love me, or you bring up faults. Wait a minute, I've got a bank account. Bank account of good things I do. Nobody should ever see fault in me. So there's covert contract number one. And they're all giving to get. They're all if-then propositions. Covert contract number two. If I meet your needs without you having to ask, then you will meet my needs without me having to ask. But the truth is, I can't read your mind. And everything I give you will be more caretaking than caregiving.
What does that mean? Sorry, caretaking.
Caretaking means I'm giving to you what I need to give to you, so I feel good about me. Caregiving is seeing what you might need. You might not need me to solve your problems. You might need, in fact, it's actually kind of condescending to think you do need me to solve your problems. So, and then because I give all this to you, you should read my mind without me ever having to ask, and just know what I need or want from you, and you'll give to me. Well, of course, you can't read my mind. And of course, you don't know there's a covert contract. So I end up being resentful at you and maybe acting not so nice towards you because you didn't keep your end. See, I got a scoreboard in my living room. I'm keeping track of how much I gave to you and how much you give back. I'm a terrible scorekeeper, and I'm a terrible receiver, and I'm a terrible at asking for what I want. You have to guess. All right. You should know. Covert contract. Can you see how these are messy? and these are at the foundation of everything nice guys do. Covert contract number 3 is if I do everything right, then I will have a smooth and problem-free life. Now, the problem is nobody does everything right. We're flawed human beings. We're less than perfect. But nice guys tend to think, I do everything right, which makes us really a pain in the ass to be around because we're not very good at taking accountability for when we don't. And so because I do everything right, and again, I've got the scoreboard, my life should be smooth and problem-free. But, life is not smooth and problem-free. So again, all of these are very faulty, neurotic ways of interacting with the world. But the nice guy, number 1, doesn't know he's actually operating on covert contracts because they're covert, hidden from him. They're hidden from everybody else. They're hidden from the world. They're hidden from God. But, we think, God, how come you're not giving me the life I want? I did everything right, whatever. To a woman, how come you don't like me? I've done everything right. I'm different than the jerks you complain about. So they're covert from both the nice guy, hidden, secret, unconscious, and they're manipulative as hell. And they're covert from everybody else who might need to know that they're involved in a contract of some sort. Okay. How do we do it different? We make our contracts overt. Overt. And when you start getting conscious of what your covert contracts are, some of them start sounding so ridiculous. We go, I don't even think I want to make that an overt contract. But then we start saying, okay, overt contract would be we're in a reciprocal relationship. Let's define what that reciprocity looks like. I'm going to come on your podcast at a certain hour. I'll spend a certain amount of time with you. We'll dive in and we'll talk about some stuff. You'll then promote it. I'll get visibility for me and my book and my programs. Your podcast will blow up and go viral because I've been on it. Those are all the overt contract. We didn't actually talk about any of those things. But, there is a certain overtness of, when a person asks me to come on an interview podcast and I say yes, and I kind of know what's involved and they kind of know what's involved. And usually there's some clarifying ahead of time of things and how long it will take and how many people you'll probably, will get to see. So we make it overt. And one of the hardest things for nice guys is when I work with them, when I talk to them about making their needs a priority and putting themselves first. Nice guys get a deer in the headlight looks. Oh no, that'll make me a bad man. Everybody will disown me. Nobody will like me or want to be around me. I'll be selfish. And I'd tell them, when I look up the word selfish in the dictionary, I want to see your picture. and a better term is healthy self-interest. Because if you don't take a healthy self-interest in you, who is? If I don't take a healthy self-interest in me, who's going to?
So what is a healthy self-interest? Like, what's an example of a man or a woman who has a healthy self-interest?
You asked me earlier, what's my ideal day start out like? Okay. My healthy self-interest got my ass in bed 9:30, 10 o'clock, lights out by 10-ish. Because I know if I'm going to get up at 7-ish, which I tend to like to, I got to be in bed 10:30. I got to be wound down by 10:30. Okay. That's a healthy self-interest. And, for example, when I married my wife, I've been married about 7.5 years. Just because of our daily schedules, we tend to kind of go late, eat late, eating at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, getting to bed 10:30 to 11 o'clock at night. And then at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm exhausted, right? So healthy self-interest, I've worked at doing that different. And it's funny, my wife has kind of followed my example. Now, I don't have a covert contract just because I'm in bed by 9:30. She should be too. But I just go, I'm going to bed now. And, I'll go get in bed. And, over time, funny, she seems like, yeah, I'm ready for bed too. So we're in bed. But I've made that a priority for me. Getting up at 7-ish so I can go do some meditation, do some meditative reading, do my pages, my journal writing, have that cup of coffee, relax in my own quiet space, hopefully have Nala nearby, hopefully her not chasing too many iguanas into the swimming pool. And then, my wife then gets up and, she gets ready and comes down and, we both say, you ready? Ready? And so we go take Nala for a walk in the park and throw balls for her and walk 3 loops around the park and come home. My wife does her exercise and goes to the gym and I start my work. That's a healthy self-interest. Realizing, I wanted to be healthy, me hiring a nutrition coach and me counting macros and me now getting my ass to the gym more regularly. Those are all healthy self-interest. Me taking vacation time, me, just earlier today, I had some chats with a couple of my buddies and we're figuring out when we're going to, talk this weekend. Healthy self-interest. I'm making me a priority. So it's just every aspect of life. What do I need to do to nurture me, to fill my bucket, to live my good life? And if I'm nurturing me, filling my bucket, it's likely going to overflow to people around me who are going to be blessed by my making me a priority, because now they get the benefits of me making myself a priority, and then I can choose how I make them a priority in my life. And sometimes they become a higher priority because they need to be. But I always have to get back to the default mode of myself as the highest priority. For a while today, the iguana was a higher priority, just because I didn't want that iguana to drown at the bottom of my swimming pool, because I felt bad for the iguana and I didn't want to have to fish a dead iguana out of my swimming pool either. So it was the highest priority. And it was just actually 35 minutes before I was going to get on this call. And I knew I still needed to take a shower and shave and you get dressed and be ready for the call. But the iguana became the highest priority for a short amount of time. And so got that worked out. Then I went back to making me the priority, and I shaved and showered and got dressed and made it on the call. So that's some of the ways it just looks like. It's not rocket science. And it's interesting. You and I are talking today because I got into an argument with somebody about this very subject. And what that was is that before No More Mr. Nice Guy got published, we already kind of had a contract for an ebook version of it with Barnes and Noble. But we hadn't secured a written contract. This was before Amazon, before, you could publish any book on Amazon. And then I'd been promoting myself to local newspapers, radio in Seattle, Washington, where I lived. And 2 local Seattle newspapers ran full-page lifestyle articles about me within the same week. They both interviewed me about 6 months apart, but then they ran at the same time. And, it's just purely coincidence. National media in the U.S. picked up on it. And so 2020, Today Show, Fox News, and Bill O'Reilly, who was actually a really big name at Fox News. I didn't know who Bill O'Reilly was, but, I knew it was a pretty big deal. So I'd figure out who he was. And then they sent a car to pick me up and take me to a television studio in Seattle where, I had a mural of Seattle behind me and this little cubicle and the camera up in the corner. And said, just look at that little light on the camera and talk to that light. Like I said, I had no monitor, I couldn't see what was, and so I'm being interviewed by Bill O'Reilly and I can't see a thing other than that light on the camera. And I don't, his producer probably did not tell him why the hell I was on his show, right? And, this is national U.S. television. And so he starts asking me questions like about that self-care thing. And he said, what are you even talking about? That's selfish. And he said, I said, Bill, did you have breakfast this morning? And he said, yeah. And I said, who prepared that breakfast and fed it to you? Well, I did. What's the point? And I said, that was healthy self-interest. That was making you a priority. And he goes, Jesus is going to strike you down. And I go, okay. And I just kept my sense of humor about it. And like an hour after that interview, it was a live interview. About an hour after that interview, my agent sent me an email and he said, we've got a book contract.
Hey,
Barnes and Noble loved so much. They were watching how I handled Bill O'Reilly. They said, this guy he'll be a good promoter of his book. And that's really all they're looking for. They just wanted to know that I'd promote them. So because of that discussion about self-care and making yourself in it, you and I are talking about the same subject today. Now, probably 25 years later.
It's wild how the little seeds get planted and those moments that you don't expect turn into things that you could never imagine. Hey.
Yeah, I mean, that could have been a total disaster. Bill O'Reilly telling me Jesus is going to strike me down, and I didn't crumble. And so it was around this very subject. And so it got me a book contract, and here we're all. So thanks to Bill O'Reilly, No More Mr. Nice Guy still selling books 25 years later.
Brilliant. So what was your thought process in that moment when he started, ripping into you, or as the kids say, roasting you.
Roasting me, as the kids say. All right. Like I said, my vocabulary will keep getting expanded. Roasting.
That's right. We're learning always.
That's only the second television interview I'd ever done. The first one actually was a day or so earlier with another interviewer at Fox News and in the same little studio. So luckily it was the second time I'd done it. I'd done live radio interviews prior to that and already dealt with, the shitloads of anxiety. I mean, I had shitloads of anxiety about being on national television and, just being, I had no idea what I didn't even know till they put me in the room that I wouldn't even be able to see a monitor or see what the people are seeing while they're watching the interview with me. I had no idea. So I in high school, I was in debate. So I had 2 years of that. I was a state debate champion. I'd been a minister for 8 years. So I've spoken in front of people. And I think I just had learned to calm myself enough. I'd had enough experiences. I remember first sermon I ever preached at 16. I had allergies and I'd taken an antihistamine before I got it. And it was in a black church in Seattle. And I got up there and started talking and my throat just went dry.
Oh, no.
And just... I started coughing and somebody went and got me water and these people are all loving it. Oh, preach it, brother. Amen, brother. And so, I survived, right? One other time when I was a young preacher, actually, by the time I had gotten a degree, I was up in the pulpit and same thing. My mouth is going dry and I had a glass of water kind of up there in the podium pulpit. And I reached for it and I knocked it off and it spilled all over the front of my suit. So it looked like I'd wet my pants, right? Yeah. So I'd had enough experiences of knowing I'd survive. I would survive the stress of it. And now, my mantra is just, keep my feet on the ground, breathe, have fun, make a mistake. I often repeat that to myself before I do any call just to keep me in the moment. And so, it happened. And I kept my cool and it paid off.
That's good. I appreciate you sharing that. It's a very interesting development through the growth of this whole project in your life and these
it's just the things that we might not ever know would be a big deal, they turn into a big deal.
What lessons can you take from that, do you think, if you're listening and you're going down the pathway of figuring your things out or starting a new project?
Some takeaways is there's a phrase I like that says, relax, nothing's under control.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah, I'll tell you another story. I had a little icon of a little Buddha, statue of a Buddha that said that, relax, nothing's under control. And I won't go into a lot of detail, but back when I did Facebook, I don't like social media at all, but I had that on my Facebook page. And my mother's sister invited her to join Facebook. And so she did for a couple days. And she wrote me, said, you have a Buddha on your Facebook page? No? Yeah. Said, Buddha's an idol. It's a false god. This is a text message from my mother, right? Fundamental Christian. Yeah. I said, no, actually, Buddha's not an idol and is not a god. Buddhism doesn't even speak of God. And I don't identify as Buddhist, but I like a lot of Buddhist thought. And I kind of explained to my mom a little bit about Buddhist thought that, there's non-duality and just non-attachment and just a few things like that. And then I thought she kind of calmed down a little bit. Then she goes, but Buddha didn't die for your sins.
Yeah.
I go, you're right, Mom. You're right. So anyway, relax. Nothing's under control. So I think that's good to know because here I'm telling you a story like where this conversation with Bill O'Reilly, that kind of felt like it was going south, turned out to be, a really positive thing. And other things happened early on around No More Mr. Nice Guy. The thing that really kind of got the ball rolling is that a writer from Esquire magazine Googled, he was doing research to write articles and contacted me. And he came out and did an article about me before the book ever got published. And so I was going to be featured in Esquire magazine. They had a professional photographer come up, take pictures. And that's one of the things that helped me get an agent. So I was good. That helped me start getting the book pushed. And then this article is supposed to come out in September 2001. And probably we've all heard of 9/11. 9/11 hit, and then the article got pushed back and got pushed back And it never got published. So this article about me in Esquire never came out. But the New York Times made a reference to a psychological guru who was an article in Esquire, got pushed back. So now I've got a quote that New York Times calls me a psychological guru. All right, so that never happened. All right, then I was supposed to go on Connie Chung. And the day before I was supposed to go on Connie Chung, the space shuttle blew up.
You're not having much luck there, are you?
Okay. And then, I think prior to Connie Chung, 2020 sent a news camera to Seattle, a camera crew, to film me doing like a 3-hour seminar at a little university where you go do like self-help presentation. So they did a 3-hour, just taping me leading this, this class. And about the time it was about to go live, George W. Bush decided we needed to invade Iraq. And so that never happened. So, I'm thinking maybe I'm responsible for some really major catastrophes. I'm not sure. But, nothing's under control. Let's go with it, because so many other good things happened that I couldn't have predicted or said about either. So for me, the takeaway is kind of does go back to that Buddhist non-attachment. How can I be equally okay with every possible outcome? How can I be outcome agnostic and just show up, bring my A game, bring my best intentions, and just know I got no control. All I can do is show up and then let go of what's out of my control.
Just quickly, though, I want to talk to you about a taboo but very important topic. Sperm health. I bet you didn't think I was going there. One day I want to have kids, and like any future parent, I want to give them the best shot at a healthy life. But let's face it, we're at a war every day with our health in this modern world. Chemicals, microplastics, and artificial environments are wreaking havoc on our internal systems at every turn. And if you know me, I'm obsessed with health, and the health of my swimmers have been on my mind for a number of years. That's why we've partnered with Legacy, who are changing the game in at-home sperm testing and freezing in the US. Did you know that globally, sperm counts have dropped by 50% in the last 40 years? Let that sink in for one moment. This is not just a fertility problem as well, because low sperm quality has been linked to a high risk of testicular cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and even early death. And on top of that, your sperm quality begins to decline around age 30, and by your 40s, the risk of infertility and having a chance of a child with neurological disorder begins to go up. So testing and freezing now may be the best decision I make for my future family, and potentially you too. So Legacy makes it easy. They send a kit straight to your door. You do the business in the comfort of your own home, and in 48 hours, the results are on your phone. Plus, you can freeze your sample at 2 secure locations for peace of mind. So if you're like me and you want to be proactive with your future, as well as support the podcast, head over to givelegacy.com and use the code TOT at checkout for 10% off. That's givelegacy.com using the code TOT for 10% off. Thanks for listening. Now back to the podcast.
On this note of the mindfulness practices that, may potentially be Buddhist led, but there are many different frameworks that are used across the globe.
Many different, yeah.
What value do you see in some of these practices for, like meditation, yoga, journaling? You've mentioned you've done some for the nice guys and for people who want to understand kind of cues when it comes to dating and developing relationships. Like, what value do you see in it? What examples do you have of some good practices to take, and what's an indicator that you're starting to get it?
Well, there's about 3 or 4 questions in there. You know what? I'll just kind of maybe this is kind of a reverse engineering of your question. I don't know that I can tell you what I get out of daily meditation. I don't know that I can tell you what I get out of reading, good stuff around mindfulness, or listening to Anthony DeMello, or reading Thich Nhat Hanh, or my morning pages from, The Artist's Way. I don't know if I can tell you what I get out of taking my dog for a walk every morning. I just know that when I don't do those things, my days start feeling overwhelming, not particularly fulfilling. I'm not enjoying my life as much. I just get caught up and swept away, and I'm not living very intentionally, and I'm not taking the time to love myself, to enjoy some solitude, to take a siesta. I'm glad I live in a culture that honors a siesta. But if I'm not making those things a priority, I just don't take siestas. I just work through stuff. So what I do know is that I try to live, the term I use is my sweet spots. I try to live my life as much as I can in my sweet spots. And when I don't live in those sweet spots, I feel it. I don't get enough sleep. I'm tired. I get edgy, get critical, get demanding, hurtful, demeaning. I'm just not happy. And I generally trend towards happiness in general. So I've just found, I can't say, well, my meditation does this.
Yeah.
Or the writing those morning pages does that. Or talking to my men's group does this. I've just learned those are my sweet spots. And just kind of an example is today, you were my first thing on my calendar at 1:00 in my afternoon. And I've known for a long time that's my best day, for I don't have anything on my calendar till 1 in the afternoon. And then I might go well into the evening. But that's just kind of how I work best. And lately, since, I started building and launched my men's membership program, and I have a lot of meetings I have to be on Zoom. I've been doing a lot of interviews lately, probably 8 this week. A few weeks ago, I had 11. That's a lot of time during the day.
Yeah.
That's not a sweet spot to do. I love doing interviews, but 1, maybe 2 a day is my sweet spot. And so sometimes I learn the hard way. All right, 3 interviews in a day, I'm exhausted afterwards and probably not at my best. So today, when I saw my calendar that I didn't have anything till 1, it reminded me that's my sweet spot.
Yeah.
And it felt good. So my wife's out of town this weekend. I got up at 7, did my meditation, did my morning pages, took Nala for the walk, got home, got into the gym. That's a sweet spot I found out. I got my workout in. I was actually enjoying my smoothie when I had to go rescue the iguana from the pool. But even that was a sweet spot that I was sitting and enjoying the beauty of where I live. And all of a sudden this green flash goes and my dog's chasing it into the pool. So, but that's the sweet spot. Now today I'll have a client after you. I'll have another interview later today. I'll wrap my day up with around 6:30 and I'll just go, okay, that's been a good day. Mainly because I consciously lived in my sweet spots. And the more I do that and the less time I stay out of what's not my sweet spots, the better I just tend to do. The more full my bucket seems to be, the more happy and optimistic I am. So that's the best answer I can give you, is when I don't do the stuff that I know sets my day up well, I pay a price, because what happens is that starts becoming the norm, not the exception. It becomes the rule to not do those things. Now, it's okay if I occasionally don't do my meditation or the pages or miss walking the dog, but it better be the exception, not the rule. And it better not happen more than 2 or 3 times in a row, or that's problematic. And I've just learned that over time.
I fundamentally agree with you on, the meditation, the journaling, the morning pages I've been on and off doing for a number of years, and it is extremely impactful.
When you're more on than off, it makes a difference, doesn't it?
It really does. Yeah, it compounds. I think the core of this is there's lots of little things that individually have small impacts, but together they are very, very powerful.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You heard of like death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah,
well, it's just the
1,000
opposite.
cuts.
So this is life by 1,000 little things that keep us in our sweet spot.
Life by 1,000 flowers. I don't know.
Well, we'll have to work on this one.
We'll workshop that one.
We're not there yet. We'll work on it.
There's a good idea there. But yeah, for sure. So going back to all the nice guy stuff and kind of getting more of an understanding. Would you say that there's value in this sort of work for those people who are chronically nice guys or chronically, people pleasers that have issues around, relationships and understanding, subtle cues of humans and that sort of stuff. What value have you seen from your experience in this sort of modality?
Yeah. Well, great value. Otherwise, you and I wouldn't be talking 20 years after my book was published, 20 plus years.
Yeah.
People sometimes ask me, when do people tend to find what I teach, my books, or, find me on YouTube or take one of my classes or something. And most often is when they're struggling. And usually, not always, but often struggling around relationship. It may be a young man that has no clue how to talk to women. It might be a 25-year-old that's never had a girlfriend, never had sex. It might be somebody who's had relationships, but they always seem to go south in a big hurry. It might be somebody who's had a long-term relationship or two, but they're going through just really difficult times, or maybe even a breakup. So it is often when guys are struggling around relationship that they go looking for answers. Whether, how do I get laid? How do I talk to women? How do I deal with my wife who's angry at me all the time and never wants to have sex anymore? How do I handle, getting over a divorce? Whatever it is, men go looking for answers. That's one thing about us guys. Again, men do buy self-help books, men do watch podcasts, but we often go looking for answers after the fact, late. Yeah. But we don't know to look for answers before we have the problem, right? Yeah. We don't know that what we're doing might become problematic. So that's when a lot of people find me. And as I said, I get countless emails and messages from people saying, Robert, I've read every self-help book out there. Your book was the one that truly spoke to me. Your book really was the one that made sense as to why things weren't working well for me. And it's not that I'm all that brilliant or all that genius, but I am a recovering nice guy. And so I wrote about my own experience. I tell people, no more Mr. Nice Guy is autobiographical. I just use other nice guys to tell my story. And, and I've worked with nice guys for 30 years. So I get it. And I am a nice guy, and I make all the nice guy mistakes, and I've learned everything the hard way. And so what I find is that once people understand this basics around like covert contracts, around trying to get approval, around, hiding themselves, once they learn to start making their needs a priority, work at being honest, work at connecting with men, because most nice guys will report they don't have a lot of guy friends, don't trust men. They seek validation from women. Mm-hmm. So once they start doing really some of these basics, finding safe people to release their shame to, they start seeing dramatic changes quickly. All of a sudden, they get bolder. They take risks they wouldn't have taken before. People start responding to them differently. Women start liking them. Women start getting naked on first and second dates when they could never, get a woman. Things start happening. They start giving a few less fucks about everything that their girlfriend or wife is pissed off at them about. They start being more differentiated and asking themselves, what do they want, and reconnecting with their buddies, and, letting their wife or girlfriend be angry at them. And then their wife in anger starts going, he's actually kind of sexy when he doesn't grovel so much, Yeah. They start just seeing things different. But I tell you what, there does seem to be a real core dynamic here, that the really big game changer, what puts everything on steroids and moves it forward, is usually getting into some kind of men's group, going to a workshop with men, some kind of men's program, men's retreat, men's weekly group. I did most of my nice guy recovery years ago. It started in a 12-step group that was all men, and then later joined a men's group around sexual shame that I was in 5 or 6 years. And that's the time that I wrote No More Mr. Nice Guy. And then like 7, 8 years ago, about 7 years ago, I'd moved to Mexico. I'd gotten married. My wife and I were having some struggles in our first year of marriage. I was feeling isolated, disconnected. I went looking and luckily found me a men's program that I was in for 5 years, and it was transformative. It continued the work that I'd begun 30 years ago. And so it's like, I've never gotten over this need to have a community of men. So I still have several communities of men that support me and hold me accountable and are there for me. So I'm a really big fan of, to really make this shit work, and keep it working, we need community. We need community with men, as I said, to support us, to hold us, to confront us, to keep us accountable, to challenge us. And that's when this stuff really, really takes off.
Have you read the book, The Way of the Superior Man?
Let me see, maybe 27, 35 times. Yeah, I discovered Way of the Superior Man 2 or 3 years after my second divorce. So I was in my late 40s, maybe pushing 50. And I remember several of my clients had mentioned it several times. I thought, well, that's kind of a weird title, kind of a weird name for the author. And so for whatever reason, I put off reading it. Finally, I started reading it. And I remember I was dating a woman at the time, and I said, this book is amazing. This is my new Bible. And I said, this is a great companion book to No More Mr. Nice Guy. They're very different books. But, you would not believe how many interviews I'm on that mention No More Mr. Nice Guy and Way of the Superior Man, in tandem. Yeah. And so, I've read it. Probably a minimum of 30 times. I've done a few workshops with David Data. The men's program that I've been in for the last 6+ years is with a guy named John Wineland, who has studied with Data for over 15 years, and probably they are a parent of David Data. So David Data's works had a big impact on me as well. And so I'm very grateful for that. I have heard of that book. and I do recommend it. I highly recommend it.
It was a game changer for me when I read that before I read your book. And I remember just reading that book and going, wow, it makes so much sense now. And the really key thing that you've been talking about here, and I think it's very, as you said, they have similarities in the masculine feminine dynamic. I think that's the core thing that really is similar in them both, and how you were speaking before about attraction, etc. The feminine understanding, the understanding that feminine people flow with their emotions was probably one of the most impactful things I learned.
How about that?
Where you're like, wait, so you don't have to. I couldn't believe it. Like, I didn't think it was true when I first read it, but the idea that you don't have to solve these emotional problems when they arise, and most of them go away on their own.
Well, as I heard David say in a workshop years ago, and he talks about masculine and feminine, and talks about men and women. He conflates the two at times, which can be confusing because we all have a masculine and feminine side. Our feminine side is an empty bucket with a hole in the bottom that needs to be filled from the outside. And our feminine side feels everything it feels deeply. Our masculine side is non-needy, and it's just okay, what needs to be done, let's do it. Let's do it masterfully. Let's rest in nothingness. They're very different energies. And in a feminine identified body, David says women are the weather. And I remember just hearing that going, oh, that explains a lot.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Like you say, it's kind of simplistic, but even the feminine in me is the weather. Just like 3 days ago, today is Friday. So I had a call with my group of men on Wednesday. And I woke up Wednesday morning just feeling sad. For no real reason, just an existential sadness. And I talked about that with my group of men on Wednesday afternoon. And, they could all relate to that in various moments just felt a deep disconnect. I think it may be a spiritual issue, a disconnect from source, from the oneness, being in this human form. It may be epigenetic. It might be, trauma. I don't know. I couldn't relate it to anything other than sometimes I wake up feeling sad. And I talked about it and hit the gym later and worked out 3 days in a row, and I haven't felt sad since. Okay, so it came and it went, but I didn't try too hard to figure it out. I didn't try to fix it. I just talked about it. I felt it, let it be, didn't try to chase it away. And, I felt really up and optimistic for 3 days since I actually let myself feel it and talk about it. So that was just my feminine having feelings that may come and go. So it is nice to know that. And a practical application. I started doing relationship therapy 40 years ago. And again, I bumbled my way through 3 marriages and we're all just bumbling our way through. But I would say, as a marriage therapist, the number one thing couples fight about, men and women, this would be true in any relationship, because almost every relationship, whether it's straight, gay, lesbian, there is usually an identified masculine pole and an identified feminine pole. There's a pitcher, there's a catcher, there's a top, there's a bottom. And ironically, I think gays and lesbians understand that better than straight people. Right?
Yeah.
We straight people who kind of grown up with this kind of feminist, proposition that, we're all the same. There is no gender. It's a social construct. We just flow between, I don't believe that's actually true. And I don't believe there's a gay man on the world that believes that, or a lesbian woman that believes that. They know in relationship, you need a top and a bottom. You need a doer and a done to. And that's okay, right? There's no right or wrong, good, bad about that. But we straight people, especially the younger you are, go, we're all the same. And how boring is that? If you think about it, if you have no polarity in sex, if you don't have a top and a bottom, a pitcher or a catcher, you have 2 bodies lying next to each other waiting for something to happen. That's pretty boring sex. And it's actually pretty boring relationship stuff as well. Okay, so if we accept there's a polarity, and I love how John Wineland, my coach, talks about that masculine feminine polarity. He'll break it down for our physical body, our emotional body, our sexual body, our spiritual body, can lean more one way or the other towards our masculine and feminine polarity. And that plays out differently in our relationships with friends, with the opposite sex. So here's what I found people fight about, probably in most relationships. The more feminine identified person makes an emotional statement. You don't love me. You never say you love me. I hate you. And the more masculine identified person goes, what the fuck? That's crazy. and starts arguing the facts of that emotional statement. Of course I love you. I show you, I love you all the time. Look, you're flying first class. You're wearing Lululemon. You can get it. That's my argument. What do you mean I don't love you? So when the feminine identified pole in the relationship, makes the emotional statement, and the more masculine identified pole, starts arguing the facts. What happens is the feminine identified person is going, I feel unheard, unloved, and unvalidated. This is terrible. He's an asshole. And the more masculine going, she's fucking batshit crazy. And so when I talk to men, usually more in their masculine identified, they go, so what do you do with that? How do you know that they've just made an emotional statement? And I go, well, 2 ways. One, it sounds batshit crazy to you. That's how you know it was an emotional statement. If it was actually a rational, factual statement, you'd go, I think her facts are wrong, but I see where she's coming from, right? No, you go, that's fucking Looney Tunes. How can she even feel or think that, right? And I said the second way you know it was an emotional statement is you want to argue the facts. Right? You're bringing up the this and that because she's probably already said it's never or always or, I hate you or you're the biggest asshole on the planet. And it's an emotional statement, right? Those are all emotional statements. And we're going, I'm not the biggest asshole on the planet. Let me prove it to you, Yeah. So it's good to know about that polarity and just how we kind of interact with the world differently.
Yeah, definitely. It has changed the way I view a lot of things, and it changed the way I view my internal interactions as well, which we were speaking about. So,
between your own masculine and feminine poles inside of you, sure.
Yeah, and there's a follow up kind of thought that I'm trying to work through with the homogenization of masculine and feminine polarities.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's what it is, right? And it's funny. I'm seeing I'll go on TikTok and you see a lot of these comments of mainly women saying, "Where are all the good men?" And
which feminized them all. That's where they've all gone.
That's the thing. So, and then there's people now. There's now a lot
but the
of
question
pushback.
is, what are you doing on TikTok, listening and watching that stuff? You're part of the problem. Right?
I love it. I find it very curious because what ends up happening is you get a wide understanding of the heartbeat of the culture through those social media platforms.
No doubt.
Like, that's the core of it. But
you find out how fucked up we really are.
Yeah,
on those
honestly, we are, and we're quite lost. So I wonder, is there a way to, I think the feminist movement came with good intentions. I think at the core of it. Now,
I agree.
It's gone in a direction that maybe there's always externalities and second, third order consequences that 99.9% of people don't see, and we're now beginning to see that. So, from your experience and understanding on all of this and working with a lot of people, what do you think, is there a path that you can see where we can begin to bring back the masculine feminine dynamics in a healthy way without destroying the equitable society, work for men and women on, in corporate and other elements? Or is it always going to be an imbalance, and that's just that? Here's
my opinion. Well, everything you've gotten so far is my opinion. I'll just take
Sure, of course.
Okay. Here's what I see, because I've been seeing this for a while. Like I said, I grew up during the angry feminism, the 60s and 70s. My mother she never probably would identify as a feminist. She didn't burn her bra, but she was probably a pre-feminist for a few things. One is that, she raised her children, but when I was about 12, she went into the work world and she rose up. She had a successful career by the time she retired. So she did become very career oriented, very intelligent woman. She raised her sons to not be entitled assholes like their father, to not be, that patriarchal kind of point of view. Mm-hmm. She raised her daughters. So she had two boys and two girls, 4 kids in the family. She raised her daughters to be self-sufficient and not need a man. Without really knowing, kind of that became core, feminist principles. Mm-hmm. And so, I learned to cook, to clean, to sew. I've sewn clothes on a sewing machine before. I've done hands. I haven't done any of this in 50 years probably, but I learned how to, and I'm glad I can take care of myself. I can cook my own meals. I can clean my own house. When I was dating in my 40s and 50s, women would come to my apartment and they'd look around, they'd walk around and touch things, the carpet, the colors, the candles, the smells, the furnishings, the artwork. They go, did you do this yourself? And then they go, is it always this clean? Yeah. So I'm glad I can take care of myself. I also learned hire house cleaners.
That's a big one.
So, and then when feminism came along, I was, the demands of, equal pay for equal work and, equal rights and opportunity and treatment for everybody, whether we're talking about, the racial revolution or, feminism. Yeah, of course they all made sense. Mm-hmm. Now, almost in any revolution, it almost has to get radicalized to make a difference. Otherwise people don't pay attention. Right. So, they both, whether it's things around race, whether it's things around gender, then in maybe later years, things around sexual orientation, they had to get radicalized to make a difference. Mm-hmm. And so what happens, they go from this extreme and they swing over to the other side of the pendulum. They get extreme over here on this side. And now maybe we're in a period of, everything's toxic masculine, everything's woke, everything, we're over here. There is no gender. There's as many genders as there are people on the planet. Gender's just a social construct. We've swung way over here. Now, our kind of human logic thinks, the pendulum needs to come somewhere back in the middle. But I don't go that method. I think, okay, this is probably a toxic extreme over here. This is a toxic extreme over here. I don't know where the tipping point is between two toxic extremes. What we have to do is we have to bring our discourse and how we view things to another level. Mm-hmm. So, I think we've swung way over here. I don't think we're going to swing halfway back and find an equilibrium, which is good. I think we'll actually have started having different kinds of discussions like you and I are having, a different kind of discussion. Maybe people talking to each other that haven't been talking to each other, getting curious about each other's point of view, letting go of, this may sound odd, letting go of some of our fundamentalism. It's funny how this was fundamental over here. patriarchy, fundamental Christianity, fundamental religion, just fundamental, here's how, and now we've got a new fundamentalism that, no, this is right. Whether it's coming out of woke or how we speak to each other or microaggressions, now we've gotten fundamental over here and rigid, right? And with just the same amount of anger and venom and hurtfulness that was over here. So we can't find a middle. We have to come to a new plane, a new understanding. So exactly how is that going to happen? I'm not 100% sure. I actually think it is happening, and I think it's going to happen in some really unpredictable ways, some very interesting ways.
I think it's happening through relationships because people are opting out and men are opting out of a lot of these things, and women have what they want. But they don't. But they don't want. They think they have what they want. But they don't. What they wanted, but they didn't get it.
I listen to a lot of people, and I do have a lot of conversations. We got, statistically, for the first time, at least in America, over half of all men and women under 35 report not being in a relationship in the last year. That's a statistical anomaly. Statistically, over half of men 25 and under report not having sex in the last year. That's with, as much porn and pickup boot camps and swipe right apps and hookup culture. And, people still aren't getting into relationships and getting laid. We have all the technology to make it easy, and it's not working.
It's easy for the 1% of people. The technology pulls the resources into those that can do things at scale. And being single and on the dating apps, I do not have that issue because I think I'm in the 1%.
Okay, but here's what happens when you're in the 1%. It can be actually detrimental when you get good at it. Okay, here's what happens when you get good. Okay, two things, and I know we're all over the board, and we're going to come back to can we get to a healthier place here? Yeah. But one of the things we're going to have to probably start doing is stop doing the things that haven't taken us where we don't have to swing back and get more like this, right? We don't have to go back to a traditional masculinity or a traditional idea of intimate relationship. We may still be in flux. Okay, but for example, I think the problem that I think is happening in hookup culture with our technology is basically, for lack of a better way to put it, FOMO, a lot of fear of missing out. If you get good as a guy, well, let's say if you never get good at it, you quit trying, and so you don't get laid and you don't get into a relationship because you quit trying, no matter how good the technology is. But let's say you get good at the technology. Now, all of a sudden, and whether you're good at the technology or not, every guy can look around and go, there's an abundance of hotties out there. There's hot young women everywhere. They're on Instagram, they're on Tinder, they're on Bumble, they're on Field. They're everywhere you look. They're in the mall in their little skimpy Lululemon. Everywhere you go, there are hot, attractive young women. They're augmented. They got their boob implants, their butt implants, their belly button piercing, their midriffs. They're everywhere we look. There's hot women. Now, your great-grandfather and my great-grandfather maybe saw 3 beautiful women in their lifetime, and they didn't see any of them naked, right? They didn't see any of them naked. We see naked, beautiful women. You can spend 24/7, both in person and on the internet, seeing beautiful naked women all the time. Okay.
Yeah, it's a trap.
So what happens as a guy? Maybe you actually get a beautiful, attractive woman with great virtues, but your mind goes, but she's even hotter, or she's even younger, or if I'm with her, I can't even go talk to her, or I'll miss out on her. So there's almost this, I can't make a decision on one because of these other, it'll now preclude, I can't even go for those now. They look better, yeah, she's great, but oh man, she is younger and she is prettier and she has longer legs or whatever. And you're going to see them everywhere. So I can't just pick one because I'll miss out. The other side, and again, I'm making generalizations, but on the other side, the women out there, they're getting, especially if they're moderately attractive or moderately young, they're getting attention all the fucking time.
Yeah.
They're getting men who want to take them out all the time, who want to spend money on them all the time, who want to buy them things, who want to send them on trips. We have websites set up for that very thing. Now, if you were a woman getting that constant attention, would you want to just pick one good man and settle down and have to give up all that constant attention? Because there may be more. I want that attention. The feminine thrives and is validated by external praise and attention and validation. And so, what woman would want to give up the constant goodies that come by just settling down and taking the chance and doing the hard work with just one? Now, I'm not pitching monogamy, but I am a big fan of relationships done consciously are powerful personal growth machines. And I think now everybody that's avoiding doing a real relationship and engaging in what I'll just call safe sex or safe dating or there's no, I mean, of course, a man say, okay, I can put you in situation A where you get to have sex with a beautiful woman, but you might not get an erection. You might come too quickly. You might not be able to come at all. You might not be able to give her an orgasm. She might not be any good. She may write you up and out you on social media. Or you can go look at porn anytime you want. Nothing's ever going to fail. Nothing's ever going to go wrong. Maybe your mother walks in while your wife or girlfriend. But, you don't worry about coming too quickly, not getting erections, not being good enough. What are you going to pick? And guess what men pick? They go pick the safe sex, and even just swiping right is a hell of a lot safer than actually going deep with another human being and actually having some struggles. Because I promise you, you go deep with another human being, especially one of the opposite sex, and one of you is the weather, it's going to be challenging. And I tell you what, we don't like challenge. Social media, internet has pushed everything to us since you guys were born. Your parents put a cell phone, a smartphone in your hands when you were 3 days old, and you've been pushed and entertained since day one.
I'm 32 this year, so I'm the generation that had both.
You got the cell phone in your hands when you were 5 or 6.
Yeah.
My son's turning 39 in a week or two. And we got broadband internet when he was 12, 13, 14 years old. So he got to start looking at porn and stealing music on Napster about 13 or 14.
Yeah, that sounds about right. On that note, you mentioned at the start that there's a certain way that you think we should be doing relationships as humans, and I think it ties into what we're talking about now. So how should we be doing relationships as humans in the modern world with all of what we've just spoken about?
Well, I'm not a big fan of shoulds. I tell people.
How could?
Okay. Well, as funny as this, like I said, a lot of this we need to reverse engineer. All right. What got us to the place we're going? So one of the things I tell men, especially the young men, the generation, the millennials, the Zs, I'll say at the very minimum, take your social media apps off your phone. Start there. And that already gets a deer in the headlight look. What the fuck? How can I mindlessly surf on Instagram? How can I doom scoom for hours? Just have it on your desktop. And guys are going, what's a desktop? I only have my phone. So the one thing, even just doing that one little hack of taking social media off your phone, you don't just mindlessly just start checking out wherever you are. And we all just pull our phones out. I do it too. These smartphones have only been around, 14 years maybe? But we're already just addicted. They're in our nervous system. I pull mine out, look at sports, look at this, look at the news, check my messages, go on Signal, go on WhatsApp, check my email. I do it too. I have to consciously not. Now, because I don't do social media other than from a business point of view. Yeah, I post stuff, but I don't follow it. All right. So, but even if you just took it off your phone and just, followed it on a browser like Firefox so it doesn't track you, even Chrome will track you. And just do social media purely when you consciously decide to sit down at your laptop or on your desktop and then do social media and maybe even get kind of radical. Set a timer, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. All right. You've looked at Instagram models for 30 minutes. It's time to stop now. So do it. Have fun. Enjoy it. But do it consciously.
Yeah.
I think that would go a long fucking way to having people having real relationships. Go out into a restaurant. And you know, I took my stepson turned 19 on Monday. So Tuesday night, we went out and had dinner as a family. My wife, my 16-year-old stepdaughter, my son, and his girlfriend. And we're out in this nice restaurant, a nice meal. And everybody, my whole family, was on their phone, right? And I talked to my wife about it later. My son's girlfriend was on her phone. She had her phone out the entire meal. I mean, she never put it away or put it down. She was on her phone the entire time. My son, did look at it some and put it down. My daughter was on hers quite a bit. My wife, not so much. And I left mine in my pocket just because, I thought, I'll be better than them. I won't be on my phone. I got a little higher morality there. So we could start by doing that. And kind of what I'll bring it to. In my books on dating essentials for men, I really teach a model of being a social animal. And I get during COVID, that put a big dent in it. And that made it hard. And that probably further addicted us to technology. Here, Zoom blew up. You were on Riverside. We just take it for granted. We'll just get on video now. So, but get out in public. When I got divorced and decided I wanted to date and expand my life, I just started doing everything that I could in public that I typically did at home. So I'd take my laptop and go work in a coffee shop. I'd take my newspaper. I'd go eat my dinner at a happy hour in a restaurant. I'd talk to the bartender.
Jerk off.
No, you don't jerk off in the bar. Yeah, you don't do the jerk off in public. That you still keep at home. Well, there's certain things, you do have to use some discretion.
Okay.
But, when I do say anything that I do at home, I'd go do in public. So, but I really worked at being a social animal, of just talking to people everywhere I went, men, women, young, old, dogs, cats, babies. It didn't matter. I had conversations and just became social, and my world expanded. I made friends. I had amazing experiences. I met a lot of really great, cool women. And I got to where I never did use the dating apps. They came later, but I did use Match.com and stuff like that. Once I found the joy of meeting people, because like you're on a Match.com or on an app, you see a small picture of somebody, and you go, I'll make a relationship decision based on that picture. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Who knows even, is it a recent picture? Is it even them, right?
Yeah.
But if you meet, and you base decisions on age and income, but you meet somebody in real life, you're not thinking that way. You're just thinking, is this person interesting? And so I've had so many interesting relationships. For example, I've dated and had sex with many women who were much younger than me, not because I pursued them or I never had to try to get a woman to have sex once I just started being me, right, and being in public. But younger women seem to be attracted to me. My wife points them out to me regularly, much younger women, and she's much younger than me, and she still thinks I want to go younger. But that's because she sees these women paying attention to me. So I didn't have to pursue them or chase them. But if I was on an app or a dating site, all of those women would not even look at me or because it's superficial. Okay. So I'm just a big fan. Let's get real. Let's get social again. Let's get out of the house. Let's go to meetup groups. Let's go pursue activities that you like in groups with other people. If you like hiking, go find a hiking group. If you like bowling, join a bowling league. If you like softball, go sign up for a softball team. Go do stuff with people and learn to interact with people again. I think that would be a good start to kind of, moving us away from extremes up, because the more time you spend with people, the more you get to see people as they really are, not at their just superficial, what they posted, on Facebook or X or Instagram or whatever. That's not who we are. That's what we do to get follows and likes and go, viral or whatever. In real life, you're more likely to just be you. And so, let's see what we can do, minimizing as much of that dependence on, the artificial, connection, and go see what we can do to build real connections. I think that is going to be contagious. So that's one thing I think we can do to start getting a little more sanity back into our world.
I feel like at this point in time, there's an unfair advantage for anybody who can do that. There's a very, very unfair advantage for people who can just go and speak to people in public and have the the ability to have eye contact. I feel like it's been lost. Just this looking at somebody in the eyes, listening to them, talking to them, and
we can learn.
We can learn. Yeah. So
when I've had 2 dating books, and in the dating books, I say in them, these books are really not about dating. They're about expanding your social and your emotional intelligence. And I said, but if I wrote a book about expanding your social and emotional intelligence, you wouldn't buy it. But because you want to get laid, because you want to have a girlfriend, you'll buy a book about dating, about how to help you get laid and get a girlfriend. But what I'm going to really teach you is how to expand your social and your emotional intelligence. Because yes, unfortunately, most men don't have a very large band of social and emotional intelligence, especially if we kind of grew up, with a fairly maybe male brain, maybe kind of what I'll call on the right side of the spectrum of male
the
brain.
Analytics.
Yeah, just everything's analytical. So if you grew up, and especially if we grew up with the internet, we're just surfing for information, and that was easy. Actually talking and relating to people is challenging. And then if the person you're trying to relate to is the weather and you don't understand the weather, you just won't do it. You'll just stick with doing what comes easy and just letting stuff get pushed to you. So, but we can learn. We can learn. It can be a little messy. It can be challenging. It can be highly anxiety producing, but that's all good. That's all okay. If you have good teachers, good coaches, good models, we can learn. And, all I did is I just went out and used it. I go out in public. Anybody who was standing near me, I would just start saying, how's your day going so far? And I learned to just observe their response and their reaction. Some people started talking and we had a conversation. Some people just said, fine, and looked back at their cell phone. Okay, no harm, no foul. I just did that everywhere I went. I got good at sensing if people wanted to have some kind of connection or didn't. That's social and emotional intelligence. I had to learn it. I just learned it by doing it a lot. So, but it can be done.
Put in the reps. Put in the reps.
Put in the reps. Put in your 10,000 hours. Just go do it.
Yeah. I'm conscious of your time. I want to quickly ask you something about the process of writing your book. So, and then we'll get into a couple of just general philosophical things and I'll get out of your hair. So
we're going to do that in 5 minutes, right?
We'll do it in 5 minutes. So,
5 minutes. Let's do it.
When writing your books, what was the process and the habits that allowed you to go from ideation to completion? So how do you actually write?
I write back asswards. I don't do it the way most people would recommend you writing a book. When I wrote No More Mr. Nice Guy, I didn't set out to write a book. I really did. I just started learning stuff and I'm curious. And I now in hindsight, I want to conceptualize stuff and communicate it. And I tend to do that in writing typically. And so I just started writing lessons, chapters. Now we might call them blogs to give to the guys who join my No More Mr. Nice Guy group. So every other week I'd spend Wednesdays just writing about what I was learning. And I just kept giving them stuff. And people started saying, Robert, you should write a book. You should go on Oprah. This could be a bestseller. I know a lot of people need it. So I did over 6 or 7 years. Once I thought, okay, you're right. People are right. This could be a book. And it probably went through 3 different ideations to where it ended up where it was, and a lot of editing. If I published everything I wrote, the book would have been that thick. I did realize that people don't need to know everything I know to know what they need to do to, make a change. So I learned to write while writing No More Mr. Nice Guy. Dating Essentials for Men came out of courses that I had developed and taught, and then took the material and turned that into a book. Dating Essentials for Men Frequently Asked Questions came out of forums where I'd answered a lot of questions, and I took all those questions and answers. So all 3 books came out pretty differently. The Big Stick, which I co-wrote with one of my coaches, I just set him loose on all my material, the archive of all my material. And then I gave him direction and edit, and I added illustrations and stuff. So all 4 books have been very different.
Just happened naturally.
The books that I've set down to write following more of a pre-thought kind of outline and structure, I haven't finished any of them. And there's 3 or 4 of them, right? So I'm almost better off not having a goal to my writing and just writing. So that's kind of how that process went.
Okay, makes sense. I I had one other question for you, and this is just very general, and I love to ask it. But what's the kindest thing anyone's ever done for you? And you can't say your mother.
Oh, my mother's not that kind of a person. I love my mother to death, but I didn't talk to her for 15 years. But I love her to death, and I see her regularly. So she's not the kindest person, just like her mother wasn't the kindest person.
What's the kindest thing somebody's done for you?
The kindest thing somebody's done for me. You know, I'll be sitting here doing interviews like this. My wife's out of town right now. She's in Cozumel, Mexico. I'll be sitting doing an interview like this, and I've got French doors right here on my office to my left. And so, you know, people can look in and see me. I can look out. I can see when Nala's out there. And I'll be sitting here talking to a client, doing an interview, and the corner of my eye, I'll see a glass of coconut water get set on the corner of my desk. And then the arm disappears because I can't just look, you know, and blow her a kiss because, you know, I'm focused here. So she does things like that. I'll just be doing this interview. Or maybe she and I will have a fight. We'll have an argument. And you know, it kind of ends with us being kind of at edge with each other. I just go in my office and I go work, you know, when I'm like, argh. So I come in my office and this happened just like, might have been in the last week, in the last 4 or 5 days. I'm sitting on my couch right over there. I got my laptop. I'm working. My wife comes in, doesn't say a word. We'd been to Costco earlier in the day. And she said, "Oh, can we get some Red Bull?" So I bought a box of Red Bull drinks. And I don't drink a lot of Red Bull, but when we go camping, we've been camping. So we had Red Bulls camping. And I'm just sitting there on my laptop. She comes in, doesn't say a word, sets a can of Red Bull over there on the table, and just turns around. And I said, "I love you." And she goes, "I'm sorry." And I go, So just those little things, like that little thing. My wife's just a master at those little kindnesses that just, you know, and we don't have to be fighting, which is the good part. Just out of the blue, that glass of coconut water shows up on the corner of my desk.
Those little moments. Yeah.
So that's what comes to mind in terms of the kindness.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you for coming onto the the podcast, Dr. Glover. I appreciate your time and energy. Is there anything that you're excited about at the moment that you want to let anyone in on that's listening?
Yeah. Counting macros. You know, I'm excited about Integration Nation, so my men's membership program. Guys can find, I believe men need community to be at their best. And so I'm committed. I have many, many different communities I've launched over the years. This is the one I'm really invested in. So Integration Nation, guys can find us at integrationnation.net. So that's what I've really been working on for the last 2 to 3 years. And we've been live a year now. So we just had our first anniversary. So I'm so excited still.
Great. And would that be the best place you'd want people to go to if they were trying to find you?
Just to find me in general, drglover.com, drglover.com has my courses and my podcast and my workshops and just general about me. But if it's a man looking for a men's program, integrationnation.net.
Great. And just the last question for this. What do you think the meaning of life is? You can do it in one sentence.
I can actually, but it's a whole nother podcast.
Okay.
The meaning of life is we're here to get our hearts broken.
Interesting take. Okay.
We're here to get our hearts broken. We won't actually live until we're willing to take the risk of getting our hearts broken.
Right. Dr. Robert Glover, thank you for your time. Thank you for your energy.
Adam,
I appreciate
this was fun. A lot of fun. Thank you.
I'm glad. And look, if anyone is listening and made it this far, please subscribe, give the podcast a rating, let us know your thoughts on a Q&A on Spotify or comments on YouTube. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, Adam's a great interviewer. Spread the word. Let's blow his channel up.
Thank you. I appreciate you. All right, until next time.